Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking your Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, or if you're in Europe or elsewhere, your Saturday evening to join us for this event. As some of you know, I'm Peter Skafish. I'm a co-founder of Soul, an anthropologist, an academic. I'm currently our executive director. And I want to just briefly tell you why we're having this event and what its basic purpose is. We've had a lot of success with our two symposiums, in part because we give people the opportunity to direct in person with some of the leading voices in the UAP conversation. But we know that a lot of people can't travel for the event, they can't make the event, and the event is ultimately limited in size by the size of the venues we have. So we're experimenting right now with opening up what we do in those conversations to a broader audience through an online format like this. And so look out for further events like this in the next weeks or months. And we'll be making an announcement about that soon. But you know, the long and the short of it is we really want you to get the chance, if you haven't been able to come to our events, to interact in this way with those of us who lead Soul, members of our advisory boards, and the speakers and kinds of people we bring in as speakers for the events. We're also doing this because it's an opportunity for us to hear from you. One reason our symposiums have been so successful is we really make sure we've got an audience that are very educated and knowledgeable about the issue. So those of us from government, academia, the private sector, technology, and other fields who come together in speaking roles in the symposium, we benefit enormously from getting your feedback and learning from you. So this is an opportunity for us, and we appreciate you being here for that reason. Now, third, and this isn't why we plan this, but we think this is important, is we know this is a time where there's a lot of public discussion about what the right way to have a public discussion about disclosure, about UAP science, about UAP policy. This is a time where there's a lot of discussion about what the right way to do that is. And we appreciate everyone's efforts in this sphere, in the UAP sphere. We appreciate all the different organizations, all the different voices, but we also know that the approach we take, which is very data-driven, or you could say research-driven, that is very evidence-based, and that stays very grounded and sober, even as we need a lot of imagination to understand this subject. We know that perspective is really valuable and it's valued by our audience. And we want to make it more available, both in general, but especially right now where there's a lot of confusion about recent news, recent revelations. And we want to make sure that the UAP community knows that we're here as a resource to provide vetted information, but also, more importantly, a perspective on how to assess information that at bottom is just really difficult to assess and make sense of. So that's another reason for this event. Now, before we jump in to do the questions and answers with our distinguished guests, Dr. Eric Davis and Jonathan Berte, I want to turn things over to Mara Mindrila, our Director of Strategy at Soul, who now with Jonathan Berte, Gary Nolan, and myself is really one of the driving forces of the organization and has been an enormous benefit to our work. So this is a chance to get to meet her, and she's going to speak about some different projects that we're doing in 2025. So Mara, over to you.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everyone. It's truly great to have you here with us today. And this year is going to be a big year for the Soul Foundation. I'm excited to share a bit about our vision into a more structured and ambitious organization, and one that not only advances groundbreaking research, but also welcomes those who want to be part of its journey. So the current 5 major projects that are underway that I wanted to introduce to you are Peter Skafish's policy group and Experiencer project. He will be deep diving into political and human dimensions of UAP encounters. Then we have Gary Nolan's metamaterials analysis project, exploring the science behind anomalous materials and metamaterials. My own consciousness work group project, examining how our perception and cognition intersect with the phenomenon. And then Jonathan Berte's AI initiative, harnessing artificial intelligence to push the boundaries of UAP research. So Jonathan will join us after the Q&A for an extra session. We've got that as a bonus for you, where you get to ask him questions about his new AI initiative, and we will interact together about that. So at Soul, we really believe in collaboration and community this year more than ever. And that's why we are actively looking for volunteers who can support us in communications, marketing, corporate partnerships, and fundraising mostly. But we really welcome all the help we can get, and we are grateful for you supporting our mission. So if our mission resonates with you and you'd like to contribute, I'll share some details at the end on how to get involved. So that's all on my side. Thank you. And let's dive in. Peter, back to you.
Hi, so we really want to thank and welcome Jonathan and Eric for being here. So very brief introductions, because we know you're all waiting to jump in and interact with them. Jonathan, who many of you may not know, Jonathan Berte, is the founder and the driving force and the former CEO of an AI vision company in Belgium called RoboVision, which is really one of the major AI companies in Europe currently. And he also is a leading voice publicly on technology in the Benelux area and Northern Europe. He maintains a daily or a bi-weekly column in one of Belgium's leading newspapers on technology issues. And he's emerged as a leading voice on the UAP conversation in Europe as well. He regularly lectures at the London School of Economics and the University of Ghent. And at Seoul, he has been behind the scenes, a driving force, and is really now emerging in public as someone that we hope you'll engage and hear from more. And then, of course, Dr. Eric Davis needs no introduction as far as his contribution to the conversation about UAP secrecy and the legacy program is concerned. But I do want to say a quick word about the different professional positions he's held. Until recently, he was a senior project engineer working on nuclear space propulsion at the Aerospace Corporation in Huntsville, Alabama. He's been a chief science officer for Earth Tech International and at the Austin Institute of Advanced Studies. He was the director of aerospace physics and astrophysics at the National Institute for Discovery Science and the Aerospace Research Corporation. And as you know, he also worked on OSAP, the Harry Reid initiated UAP study project, and on the UAP task force. He's also currently an adjunct research professor at Baylor University. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Eric Davis and Jonathan Berte for what I think is very stimulating conversations.
Thank you.
Hello,
Peter.
thank you.
Is the audio okay?
Yes, it's good.
Perfect, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, how do we dive in? Shall I quickly present myself or?
No, I think we can just dive straight into some questions.
Okay.
The format here will be that we're going to take general questions for about an hour, and then Jonathan, you'll present your project on artificial intelligence a little later, and we'll do some specific questions on that. I'll note to our producers, I'm not getting the first question, so I need to see that. But what I'm going to say from, I'm just going to take a first question here, which is to Eric from from someone named JH is, what are some knowns with UAP physics? We hear a lot of speculation on the physics, but we'd love to hear some things that we actually know.
Well, there's been very little signatures that have been collected from UFOs or UAPs since the dawn of the era in the modern times, when they landed in the larger public consciousness and we had an established military and scientific community with the instrumentation that can detect them and analyze the signatures. Unfortunately, measurements of those things were not a dedicated priority back in those days, starting in the 1940s. So nowadays, it's become the most important priority, like Project Galileo out at Harvard. That was established by Professor Avi Loeb, I'm sorry, and UAPX and other UAP organizations out there, including Arrow and whatnot. And so now their task is to set up sensing systems and scan the skies daily, 24/7, 365, to try to hopefully collect signatures. And signatures are everything in the electromagnetic spectrum. So everything from radar to visual to ultraviolet, infrared, and so forth. And I haven't heard that anybody has put forth any sensing capability or proposal to sense acoustic signatures. Los Alamos National Lab had the infrasonic acoustic system that was set up for the global surveillance to monitor nuclear test ban treaty violations. And it was determined that they could detect objects moving through the atmosphere at orbital speed that are as small as 5 centimeters. And those would be great detectors for UAPs traveling through the atmosphere. So anyway, so what are some of the knowns about with the UAP physics? What we know is that they exhibit physical and anti-physical properties. The physical properties are people see them moving at hypersonic speeds, and then they move steadily at very fast, steady speed across the sky. They rapidly accelerate. They can change direction on a dime without decelerating and accelerating to turn that corner. The anti-physical is that they can hover as if there was some sort of an anti-gravity or gravitational repulsion effect against the Earth's gravity field. And there's some other anti-physical things that occur as well. So the knowns are limited to what we visually observe, what eyewitnesses and what's been recorded on film and whatnot, or video. The unknowns are a lot. There's just a lot. We have very, very sparse data of any kind of electric field, magnetic field emissions, or electromagnetic field emissions. And we need those. There's only just a couple of cases I know of dating back to the 1980s and possibly even the 90s where at least a magnetic field, a DC magnetic field, was detected and recorded on a strip chart device. And so that's what we need. That's the kind of information we need. We also need thermal heat signatures, and it would be beautiful to get a spectrum. If these things are reflecting light, the spectrum can help. Because the light is reflected off the body of the craft, and what that body absorbs in sunlight that does not get reflected shows up as dark lines in the spectrum of the reflected light. And that's very helpful to help us understand what the exterior structure is made out of. So the unknowns that we need are spectrum, hyperspectral imaging, which can give us thousands to hundreds of thousands of wavelengths, as well as, and that goes across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, at least short of X-rays and well into the deep infrared. So that's what we need. We also need electric and magnetic fields, as I said, both RF, DC, and AC emitted fields. And nuclear radiation is helpful because there's been evidence from the 1950s that UAP craft have radioisotopes on board in their structures. It's not in the form of a fuel or a power source. It's been more of structural incorporated materials to alter their electromechanical, electrothermal properties. And so if we get an idea of what kind of nuclear radiation is being emitted, that would be wonderful too, because the nuclear radiation we would want to look at is alpha rays, or alpha particles, which are helium nuclei, beta rays, which are electrons, and gamma rays, and so forth. We don't expect to see isotopes being emitted. We haven't had evidence of that, where actual, uranium or californium or some other actinide atoms are being emitted, which is good. We don't need radioactive slag laying all over the place, contaminating the environment. So gamma radiation, X radiation, and the traditional alpha and beta radiation are important. Those are the unknowns we'd like to get a hold of. And so that's about it. That's about all I can think of. Okay, there's no audio coming from you, Peter.
Excuse me, Eric, that's
There you go.
that's an amazing response, Eric, and is so appreciated. That was a great way to kick this off. I'm going to go to the next question, which is for you, Jonathan. Before I say it, I'll say, we know the audience wants to engage the issue of UAP secrecy, and both Eric and Jonathan have strong perspectives on that and do research on that. So this question is for you, Jonathan. Have you found in your studies using AI and combing through old media any historical leads of note or relatively unknown pieces of information you can share with the viewers?
Absolutely. I have, of course, discovered such things because, that's the thing I do. What is important is that some of these information pieces need further investigation because they are leads. And of course, we're very careful with planting them in the public audience. It's potentially also going to create extra misinformation. So with the current stage of the Sol AI project, we're very cautious with those because we don't want to make claims unless we have like a more full picture. But there's certainly things that I will be able to share later in the coming weeks when things are more clear. Oh, you're on mute, Peter.
Okay, great. So I'd ask the producers to just keep my mic on. And I need another question, please. So
Yeah,
Eric, I want to follow up, Eric, on a question that that many people have on their mind from your talk at the Sol Symposium. There was a question in the chat, I don't have it in front of me, which concerned a statement you made publicly, which is that there is something, it's a kind of emergency executive order called a Presidential Emergency Action
Directive.
Directive, yes. And, we've had a number of people with intelligence community backgrounds who have argued or suggested that there are a number of these emergency action directives that have been written and then kept issued and then kept in secret that concern UAP and that have actually created something like a legal administrative framework for classified programs. So the question concerns, can you say anything about the source you have for that information or why you're confident about that? And can you shed some more light on that?
There's no source for this information. I have security clearances with the intelligence community and the Department of Defense, so I see these presidential emergency action directives within that community on a classified basis. So I already know their history. The Brennan Center has a web page that mentions the PEAD. The PEAD is what we'll call it here. So this isn't source information. It's not a rumor. It's not a myth. It's factual, classified information. Although the PEAD itself is not classified by name or its existence, because the Brennan Center has already written something up about it on its website. So I think the question switched in front of me, so I couldn't answer. So I can't remember can you switch that question back to the first one? Yeah, there we go. So then the second part is, how confident am I that the PEAD exists? Well, it's 100%. Because Jim Semivan, who retired from the CIA back in 2017, 2016, 2015 or thereabouts, he knows all about the PEADs. And he has encountered those during the 30 plus year career that he had at the Central Intelligence Agency. And so the PEDs are well known. If you're in the intelligence community for a long time and you work up at high level, you'll see, I'm sorry, I just got flipped off my phone there. There we go. You'll see the PEDs come up in some sort of briefing environment. Okay, what's the last part of that? There was the third part of that question. Private aerospace contractors working in the legacy programs would be intimately familiar with the details. I cannot answer that question. That is a document that's specific to the president, the White House, and the National Security Council, and probably the National Security Advisor. I don't believe a document like that goes to the legacy crash retrieval companies. In the sense that they get briefed on a presidential PED. They probably don't need to know that. They already know they're in a classified program. They know what the circumstance and the regime of that classification is. And just to know that it was established by Presidential Emergency Action Directive is of no concern to them. All they're concerned about is they operate under the NISPOM rules. That's the National Industrial Security Program operating manual. So you operate under the NISPOM rules, and you know that you set up a program under a government contract according to the steps laid out in those rules. You know what your classification environment is, and you don't need to necessarily know who originated it. And I doubt very much that anybody in the legacy programs even are aware of who initiated the whole cover for the secrecy or the whole umbrella of secrecy on the legacy programs originating from the president's office. That's probably way up above their pay grade, and I think it is. And these guys are focused more on the technical aspect rather than the policy level aspects way above them.
Okay, so a follow-up question to that, Eric, is did any Lockheed Martin executives, beside the late Dr. Ryder, have knowledge of plans to transfer UAP material from Lockheed to OSAP or Kona Blue? I know that's a kind of hot question, but it's something that has been raised, and we leave it to your discretion to answer that.
It would be Dr. Ryder's former supervisor, the executive vice president of Lockheed Martin. So she was the other one that would know.
Okay, got you. Do you have anything further to say about that? Or
no, that's about as far as I'll go on that one.
Okay. So here's a very broad question that has come up next. The producers just put in front of me, again for Dr. Davis. Who is behind UAP disinformation, and what form does it take?
Well, that's a very good question. It's kind of broad, it's kind of deep. UAP disinformation, that could be done by counterintelligence officials. That's usually their job. And their job is to shut down the leaks or to plug the leaks and hunt down the leakers of classified information into the public domain, or classified information that are going into spy cells, or individuals within the government who are insider threats that are removing classified information illegally and putting it out there to either our American adversaries or the public domain. Okay, so counterintelligence is usually the number one vector for official disinformation. Other disinformation out of counterintelligence is perception management, manipulating information to lead the public to think or lead the recipient of that information to believe something different. That you want to steer their attention and their consciousness awareness and their ideation away from the classified information into something that's more nonsensical. So you can forget about it or move on to something else and take the focus off of the spectacular classified information that got leaked. The Collins elite. Well, Nick Redfern talked about that in his book, and that's a real issue. And it is not an organized group of religious fanatics that I'll call them. In other words, people who have strong, sincere beliefs in their religious upbringing and theocracy ideology and so forth. It's that you have just individuals scattered throughout the government, in intelligence and in the Defense Department, and and maybe even in other departments of the United States government. And these random individuals have such strong beliefs from their religious upbringing and indoctrination that they were trained to understand and believe that UFOs are demonic and satanic, and recovery of UFO or UAP craft is unpatriotic. No patriotic American should study and learn about demonic technology, because we're in a war against Satan, and we're going to be battling the apocalypse soon. And this is their thinking. This is their way of upbringing. These are 4-star, 3-star generals or admirals who grew up in Kansas or Nebraska or parts of Texas and so forth, and they have a very right-wing religious upbringing that's very extreme compared to the mainstream religious denominations that were founded in the United States after the founding of the country's 13 colonies and the nation itself later on. So these are the really extreme fundamentalist evangelical folks, and there aren't that many of them. There might be 1 or 2 of them grouped together as a couple, or maybe even 3 of them have coffee or tea together, maybe lunch once a month or whatever. But there's no concerted, organized group doing anything, and their purpose is to stymie or interfere with any project or program operations that are related to UAP crash retrievals, the study of NHIs, and is that right? Non-human intelligence. I just call them alien bodies.
Okay, Eric, this is
so
great. We're gonna thank you so much, because I think there's been a lot of confusion about what the Collins Elite is, and I think it's been inflated in its significance at times. We've got another question from Elpula Gandalf is the screen name. The question is, she writes, with Lou Elizondo confirming that Majestic 12 or MJ12 is real. Let's note that that's a claim attributed to Elizondo. We're not necessarily endorsing that. Is MJ12 still working today? And I could add to that, is there something like that working group, that committee or group in existence, but could it have a different name?
Yeah, that's right. MJ12, some version of it exists today, but it's not by that name. Code names change roughly every 3 years in the defense and intelligence operations. So that code name has gone away decades ago. So there's some modern incarnation of it operating. They don't. That's not their work has nothing to do with the Collins Elite or Disclosure. That's not what they do. Their job is handling crash retrievals, reverse engineering studies of NHI or alien technologies that have been recovered. So I'm not aware that there's any linkage there with the Collins Elite. I think more than anything, the Collins Elite, which, like I said, is not an organized group, but just one individual here, maybe a couple of individuals here. And these guys are high-ranking individuals. They could either be generals, colonels, or senior executive service 1, 2, or 3 folks, or senior intelligence service 1, 2, or 3 folks. I don't know if they go as high as 4, if there's any of them at that level. And they don't work at cross purposes, and they don't coordinate with MJ12, because that's a compartmentalized program. And so that compartmentalized program is technically oriented. And the disclosure issue is not part of what that program is concerned about. That's a whole separate issue. And the government doesn't have a disclosure program anyway. And the Collins Elite type folks, they just get in the middle. If they get read into something and they get in the middle of it, they'll either walk away from it, leave it alone, or they'll try to do whatever they can to kind of trip it up a few times or a few ways and cause a little bit of trouble. But if you cause too much trouble inside of a classified program, you usually get kicked out by security very rapidly.
Okay, thanks, Eric. That's very useful. So we've got a question now for Jonathan Berte, which is very related to this, and it's from Luke Togni, an Italian academic. He writes, do the principal challenges in UAP disclosure in Europe differ significantly from those in the United States? Would answering these challenges offer a more complete framework for understanding disclosure?
It's a really good question. First of all, is my audio good? Because people are complaining that it's a bit too loud. Okay.
Yep, you're coming in good.
Yeah, I think Europe has an exceptional advantage that it's that there is no such big thing as the national security framework to tone some of these secrets down. We're much more fragmented. And for instance, the Belgian UFO wave in 1989, 1990 was pretty transparent. And I could very easily reach out to these military people, Wilfried Brouwer and politicians about it. And there is a tremendous amount of information and incident logs of this. That being said, we of course have little access to secret military programs because it's most of all US based. That's what we see in the literature and also in the data. So we have a big challenge with the people, with the audience. It's much more ridiculed than in the US, ufology and everything related to UAP sightings and so on. So it's really an uphill battle for Sol to try to convince journalists to make a normal or an objective piece in the newspaper. And many people do not have the proper context also in Europe. For instance, with this documentary coming up of Farah, Age of Disclosure, it's extremely powerful in the US because everybody knows all of these people like Burchett and Rubio. But if you show that to people in Europe, they have no clue, they have no reference. So for them, it's just mostly more fringe and bullshit. They do not have this kind of, how can I say, knowledge that UAPs are real, that they are acknowledged by US government, and that we start from there. So I would say that the original mantra of the Robertson panel in the early 50s is still very effective in Europe, and it's kind of amazing to see how easy it is to let journalists walk the line that the White House and the Pentagon want them to walk.
Okay, so Jonathan, we've got another question directed towards you, which is, I think, a good follow-up. And it's a very simple question. It's a question I know you have a lot of thoughts about and you're doing a lot of work on. So we really would appreciate a kind of full answer from an expert on this. Very simple, big question. How can artificial intelligence be used to verify the reality of UAP?
It's a really good question. It has to do with something what we call in physics entropy, informational entropy. So if you have like a loose fact or lie or a fact that has little connections with many other facts, then in our framework of our AI engine, it will have a lower trustworthiness score. So the thing is, and I explained this thoroughly in my talk, which you can consult online at the Sol conference, we've come up with this concept of written information that can be proven from decades ago has not been tainted by misinformation, potential alleged misinformation campaigns that have happened more recently. So we've come up with this concept of informational I-scores, and there are fields where the misinformation was not so rampant. And that is, for instance, newspapers in the 50s and 60s referred to very detailed incidents and detailed descriptions. For instance, the Philip Mantel incident. If you then go to the Air Force official explanation, then it's Venus. But if you go to the newspaper archives, and we've come up with this technique, this claim-based knowledge graph technique, then you see that there were a lot of witness reports that refer to the same crescent-like UAP phenomenon, and that somehow it got explained away by something really simple, like a planet or something. So that's the technique we use. We try to relate it to things that everybody trusts, like dispersed newspaper articles, because especially in the 50s and 60s, they were local, done by journalists, and when it was going to print, you could no longer edit it. And we all know about the Roswell incident and the very first reporting. I'm not alleging anything there, but the thing is that if you then combine this to national archives and presidential libraries and also university libraries like the MIT archives, the trustworthiness score goes up significantly. And if it would be a hoax, it would be terribly difficult to have like a multi-decade like synchronization between all these informational pools. And that's what we're after. We're trying to really have the most advanced techniques in artificial intelligence of nowadays, agent-based approaches like virtual investigators, to come up with like clusters of information that are so interlinked with the old informational I-scores that we can really state that they are more trustworthy than other things.
Okay, fantastic answer, Jonathan. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And I think it's important for people to hear exactly what you're putting on the table, which is that the field will change as AI enters it, and that it gives us an advantage, even if there's more disinformation. Now, here's a question I think that is related to this, that is for you, Eric. It's from AJ. It reads, did Dr. Davis share with Aero the contacts from the aerospace company that was looking to divest UAP material? Why does Aero continue to say they don't have evidence? And are they ignoring non-governmental organizations?
I don't know what Aero is doing and why they're doing it, why they say it. The answer is I briefed them on all the decades of work I've done in the crash retrieval program within the legacy aerospace industry. And I interviewed a now deceased U.S. president, retired Defense Intelligence Agency staff officers, and other senior military officers of the Navy and whatnot. And can you pop that question back up, please? So I don't want to miss. Okay, so yeah, I did share. So the question is, did I share with Aero the contacts? Probably meant contracts. I don't know, contacts from the aerospace company that was looking to divest the UAP. I basically briefed them on my interaction with the legacy aerospace companies during the OSAP, when Hal Puthoff and I worked under contract to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies to carry out the OSAP tasking. And one of my jobs was to interface with one legacy aerospace corporation and its senior vice president at one of its major divisions, who worked on the crash retrieval program during the 1970s and 80s. And so I briefed all that to Sean Kirkpatrick personally and his deputy, who was a Army lieutenant colonel in the reserve. And I briefed all that information, all of my investigations into TRW and the other companies that I investigated. And so Aero had all that information, but I do know for a fact by talking to the security officers at the agencies, I told them that I had interfaced with, the intelligence agencies that I was interfacing with regarding these topics on behalf of the DIA. The security people said there was no record of Sean Kirkpatrick even contacting them about my presence at those buildings. And I'm a deputized, at the time I was a deputized representative of the DIA, and I have a letter from James Lutkowski declaring that, where I was supposed to, if I'm knocking on somebody's door at an intelligence agency or a DOD agency and I need to get in because it's highly classified, I show them my courier card, which shows my security clearances, and the letter, and Lutkowski's name and phone number on there, so they could call him up and ask him for verification of my credentials and my need to know under the DD 254 form. So I mean, there were many people that knew of me at DIA and CIA, and they knew I was there. They knew I was providing intelligence analysis and interpretation, and basically I got word of mouth through several folks in the security operations to the Aerospace Corporation at the time I was working for Aerospace, that Kirkpatrick never approached anybody. Program managers I interfaced with never knew who he was based on the news, on what they read in the Washington Post about Aero being formed, but they never heard from the guy and they never spoke to him with reference to me. So There you
Eric,
go.
thank you. Eric, thank you, because that really helps the public understand this better. And we can say that, we know this from several other people that submitted testimony to Arrow. So another question for you, Eric, and shifting a bit to science. This is from Burning Rob. The question is, in your DIRD, I think that means your defense
Intelligence reference document.
In your defense intelligence reference document on dark energy and traversable wormholes, okay, pretty sexy science already, you theorized about a potential mass limit on traversable wormholes.
No, that's kind of garbled. That's not correct. I just pointed out that dark energy has a property in its equation of state. An equation of state for all matter relates its mass density or energy density to its internal pressures and stresses. And this is a very important parameter in cosmology and astrophysics when we look at things like the Big Bang Theory, the evolution of the universe, the evolution of stars and galaxies, and so forth. So dark energy has a positive mass energy density as we know today, and it's still pretty consistent since its discovery in the 1990s by Nobel Prize winner. I can't remember his first name now offhand. His last name was Rees, Riess. And Perlmutter. So Rees and Perlmutter got the Nobel Prize for proving the existence of dark energy. So anyway, dark energy has a positive rest energy density and a negative pressure. And in fact, in the Einstein field equations of general relativity, negative pressure overall, just pressure in general, contributes to creating space-time curvature, which we feel as a force, like the force of gravity that holds our feet down to the surface of the earth. So the properties of traversable wormholes and warp drives is that they require anti-gravitating, a space-time curvature effect that repels space out, or an anti-gravitational type phenomenon that pushes space away in order to open up a wormhole throat, open up a hole in space, or create the warp bubble that pushes space out one way and pulls it in the opposite direction. Okay, so negative pressure does create repulsive gravity, and that's an important property that can be exploited to produce a traversable wormhole or even a warp drive, regardless of the positive energy density. Because if you reduce the Einstein equations and the Newtonian limit down to what's called the Poisson equation of gravity, you'll have a sum of true terms. You'll have a sum of the mass density plus 3 times the pressure. So you see, if you account for pressure in matter, it'll have 3 times the gravitational effect or anti-gravitational effect than the energy density or mass density does. So that's why I brought that up. In terms of why dark energy was a possible source, if you can control it or create it artificially somehow. There's no mass limit to traversable wormholes, actually. What I was saying is that I was scaling the size of the wormhole throat to the negative equivalent mass of the source of matter that creates the wormhole. And that doesn't mean there's negative matter, not that it's forbidden in physics, we just haven't discovered it. I'm just saying this is the negative equivalent matter. So you take the energy, which is what you're really working in, the energy density, and you divide that by the speed of light squared to get the mass. So I'm just saying that, for example, a 1 meter diameter wormhole throat would have to have the equivalent of about 0.71 times Jupiter's mass. So just under negative 3/4 of Jupiter's mass to produce
Eric,
a 1 meter diameter wormhole throat.
I have the unfortunate duty of moderating to move you away from a long technical explanation.
Oh, that was it.
I'm sure we we just went over most people's heads, including mine, since I'm not this, as you know. Now, for everyone gathered in the audience, we are, a little later in the call, going to shift to really discussing artificial intelligence. So if you have questions or even just comments, please get those ready, because we have a really advanced AI expert here. Now, the next question, though, is for Eric, and it's a critical question. I'm not going to try to read the screen name of this person because it's got a numeral in it, or it's Quim 3 Ra. The question is, and I think it's a good question for all of us, but especially for you, Eric, is Dr. Eric Davis, all of your statements presuppose that UAP and NHI are beyond any doubt of extraterrestrial origins. It's just a
No,
comment.
my answer is I have some doubt that they're of extraterrestrial origin. I just don't know. As an astrophysicist, the first answer you would use on the most parsimonious answer would be yes, they're extraterrestrial. They're somehow coming across interstellar space from an exoplanet around another star system, because that's the most parsimonious. The more complicated alternative answer is they travel between dimensions. But hey, hang on. People talk about interdimensional beings. Well, interdimension is not a place where you live. It's what you're traveling between to go from a higher dimensional space to a lower dimensional space, or vice versa. Well, if you're doing that, they've got to come from a planet. They had to evolve somewhere. And that means essentially there's got to be a body out there that they evolved on, where, like, similar to us, because we don't have any other role models for evolution of life that's outside of being on a planet. All we know is what's possible on planets. So so even if they travel through dimensions to come to the Earth and bypass interstellar space, of which traversable wormholes would have a possibility of allowing that traversable wormholes will allow that possibility, I should say. We just can't say that they are interdimensional, because that's a wrong phrase. That's a wrong way of describing that whole thing. I just don't know. I don't have a definitive 100% conclusion that they're extraterrestrial, but it's a parsimonious explanation. It only makes sense since we're on Earth and we're now seeing signs of life on the precursors of DNA and RNA and ammonia are found on the asteroid Bennu, and like to big order they were, according to the news that was published in Nature magazine's feature article and the Science News this week. And so I can't imagine anywhere else that NHIs would originate from. You can only breathe a gaseous atmosphere to exchange molecules to sustain your metabolism, and intake chemical proteins in order to sustain your metabolism as well. And so I just don't know. I just don't know, because I'm not a biologist and I don't have access to those gray dudes that were found dead in some of those crashed recoveries. And I wish I could say definitively it's 100% extraterrestrial. I don't know. Hal Puthoff's got the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, which includes that option. Here's the other part of that option in his ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. They originated on Earth. They're just an advanced form of Homo sapiens that split off. And they're unknown, and they were way ahead of us technologically. And somehow they got so advanced that they decided to leave the Earth, colonize the stars. So obviously that means they had interstellar propulsion technologies. And then thousands of years go by, or maybe tens of thousands, they come back to Earth to see how we're doing, see what's happened to life on Earth after they left and how it's progressed. And so they're here and they're living amongst us and so forth. That's one version of it. And I'm not accurately reflecting that hypothesis verbatim, but that's my recall of it. There's other little bit more exotic things that are less parsimonious as well. So
Okay, great, Eric. Thank you.
That's about as much as I can say on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's everyone remember we're just discussing hypotheses here. Neither I think Eric nor Sol is endorsing specific hypotheses as though we know that they've been verified or even the best ones.
Yeah.
Now we've got a question that is both for Jonathan Berte and for Eric Davis. And Jonathan, why don't you take this one first? In your opinion, says the questioner, what would be the most effective way to bring serious study of UAP into various academic circles outside defense? And I'll add various professional circles, including the private sector.
Well, the whole idea about deep learning and neural networks is to have clean data and a lot of clean data to train it on. So that's already a conundrum in this space because there is no clean data set. So I admire the efforts of Avi Loeb and the Galileo project to come up with such non-defense related data sets and to, for instance, map the speeds, everything related to how these UAPs behave. And yeah, that's about it for the moment, because all the rest is actually applied sociology. If you have to dive in newspapers and see how things were reported in the 50s and 60s, it's detective work that is not so much about UAP, but how humans relate to those news facts, and how different factions of humanity are fighting for the truth, and others are concealing the truth. So there are two sides of it. There is the historical component, and there is the component of finding the data ourselves. And that being said, of course, there is a lot of evolution in the last 20 years in camera and sensor technology. Sensors that were brutally expensive 5 to 10 years ago, like high-res infrared imagery and hyperspectral, are now much more cheap. So what you see is that clusters of technical people are pointing very advanced sensors to the skies and seeing things that we cannot see with our own eyes, because everybody knows that we only see a very, very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So I think that we're on the brink of a lot of new open data sets, also some new openness due to political facts. And we often see also just data sets emerging from like astronomy centers and so on. So I do think that we're on the brink of a new era of serious UAP studies, where we have access to more data. And this data will very often be generated by institutes and civilians away from the defense community. Eric, do you have something to add to that?
That's a great question, and you hit the heart of the answer there. I just wanted to add, Peter, how do you pronounce Beatrice's last name? Villarreal?
Villarreal.
Villarreal, yeah. Villarreal, okay. So she's in Norway, correct?
No, Sweden, Stockholm.
Okay, yeah, so she's another one like Kevin Knuth and Matt Sudeikis at UAlbany in Albany, New York, and the Galileo Project. And I think there's a few others out there, and I'm forgetting one that I met here in Austin last summer that you saw, Peter, when you were here with me at an event. And those are the first, like that's the first cracks in academia, or maybe the doors. They're now the groups that are opening the door to academic studies on UAPs more broadly. But to bring the crash retrieval program and the classified government data that's been collected since 1933 into academia requires one single act. That information and access to the hardware and the recovered bodies needs to be declassified. And it needs to be declassified, but only up to the point to where we don't compromise national security by declassifying aspects of that technology that could be used by the adversaries as a weapon against us. So we have to protect that level of information. But otherwise, anything having to do with power and propulsion, the military is going to want to waffle on that. That goes to the heart of a military platform that delivers a weapon. But you should be able to do it because, hey, commercial jets use the same type of jet engines that military jets and fighters and helicopters use. So they're dually used. So we could be able to carefully control that so that the worst of that technology doesn't get in the enemy hands, but the best of it could be what we could use in academia to improve energy and transportation and electronics or whatever version of electronics the NHIs have. It would need a single act of a complete sweeping declassification, get rid of the SAP stovepiping, and bring it all out in the open. And that's actually a plan that Hal Putoff and I had with Bigler Aerospace with one of the legacy crash retrieval programs to do that, was to bring it out of their storage and bring it to EarthTech. And then we at EarthTech would turn it around and contract with that same company to have the best of their materials and engineering scientists working on that material in an open environment where they would be allowed to publish scientific papers on their findings, on their discoveries in the open literature. And then we would reveal to the world after the fact, hey, see this published paper in Science and Nature? Well, guess what? That stuff that those papers were writing about, those discoveries that were made came from the recovery of unidentified aerial phenomenon technology from another world, or off-world technology not made by humans. So I think also one last thing, the work that you're doing along with Jonathan and Mara and others on anthropology, philosophy aspects and issues, AI and whatnot, those are the larger questions that go beyond the physics, the STEM fields. So those are necessary. Those are important, as well as psychology and social psychology. So those fields are areas of academia that have always been necessary to open our eyes to understand the human response and reaction to UAP phenomenon. Or, well, that's a redundant word, isn't it, to say UAP phenomenon?
Wow, Eric, it's a fantastic answer, and thank you for being so broad-minded as a physicist, but also you've offered a much more progressive and courageous perspective on how declassification could work than many people from the DoD offer. And Jonathan, too, thank you for that response. I think this is very useful in providing guidance to people that want to work on this seriously. Now, we've got one last question before we transition into a more focused discussion on AI with Jonathan. And it's a question for Eric that was sent in outside the chat, but was forwarded to me. And this is a pretty technical question, so you might have to explain what the questioner is asking about if you could address this. What investigation has been done into dusty complex plasma or the Kordaluski clouds to potentially understand UAP activity?
I've never heard of any of that. I don't know anything about those.
Okay, disappointing. That one looked really good to me. And Jonathan, because I know that you keep abreast of physics, is this something you're familiar with?
It's a book I started reading and which was truly interesting. I also posted it in a group for Eric, but you didn't read it yet, probably. So maybe I comment on it in the next session. It's okay. It's a bit too far. Right
okay, we got you. So we're going to transition a little bit here, and please, everyone, stay with us because I think this is going to be very interesting. Jonathan will present now just a little briefing for about 5 minutes on what he's doing in building on the back end some AI infrastructure and the different uses of it he's proposing on the front end. So Jonathan, why don't you take it away? And after that, Mara will start to direct some questions to you.
Yeah, at Sol, we're using the latest and greatest in AI. So the models the frontier models that everybody knows about, OpenAI, but also DeepSeek R1 right now to see what is actually most functional, most efficient in extracting these claims. Because what you have is just a whole lot of documents, books, literature, descriptions of events and all that, and you have typically relationships in between entities that are relevant in this field. That could be people that have worked in the military, but also witness reports or other institutes that have found something or that have worked on anomalous materials. Now, the efficiency of these models, extracting those relationships, those edges in the knowledge graph and in between those entities is extremely essential to our job, because normally a knowledge graph, which is like a semantic relationship scheme in between entities in a certain ontology. It's a difficult word to say that the facts are being presented in a way that they are all relating to each other. That has typically been done in the past by humans and investigators, for instance, also in murder case investigations. So we're living in times where all of a sudden this human component can be replaced by AI. So experts are being replaced by virtual experts, let's say. And this requires, of course, the right strategic decisions. And those decisions are being made as we speak, in the sense that we've managed to do an MVP of about 8 months, which is being finalized right now. And with efforts like these, the sessions, virtual sessions that we have, we want to explain what we've done, what we've been doing, but also raise more awareness about the importance of our work. Because if one thing is so important in the UAP topic and online on social media, it's the extreme high noise factor and the constant back and forth of claims. Also very actual and relevant, for instance, New Jersey. If you look how it all started around 30 November with some sightings, and it like ramped up until the beginning of December. Then we had this statement of now President Trump saying like, it's very curious. It doesn't seem like the enemy. And then again, a statement from the White House that it was FAA approved. With AI and with a knowledge graph, we can really point out the facts very, very clearly towards journalists that can report about it. Because now those journalists like Julian Barnes and so on, they're very often just stating what the Department of Defense wants them to state. And this is what we want to bring to the community. This AI engine has, most of all, 3 different components. So it's the engine is very generic, but it has different audiences. One of these audiences is you, the general public, where we aim to have like a free tier and a very expert tier, as you say in English. We have, of course, the press and everything related to it, to be able to give the right context and the right, how could I say, information on hot topics like the drone phenomenon. And then ultimately we have academia and research, and there the AI engine is much more focused on the historical archives for the work that, for instance, Peter is doing. So all in all, I'm very happy to answer your questions. I'm not going too much into technical detail because I'm aware that many in the audience are, not AI experts or data scientists. So please, send me the first question, Peter. Shall I?
Yes.
Could AI be trained to recognize pattern in
Wait,
related...
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Jonathan is too quick. He's eager to answer your questions. So there it is. Thank you for your question. So could AI be trained to recognize patterns in psi-related data, for example, remote viewing, biophotons, coherence, and refine predictive models for UAP interactions? So thank you for your question, Philips.
Sure. It's, of course, a thorny field because it's, consensus reality and the scientific community wants to have hard lab almost setups to do their experiments. So we're working with a lot of data. And one of the earliest data on psi data was the BSRA, which is being managed now by the Archive of the Unknown, I think, in Sweden, somewhere in Stockholm. And this community of government people, psi-enabled people, and normal civilians was already active in the 40s and working with very similar stuff that later became remote viewing and that kind of psi activities. And if you apply AI to those extremely large troves of literature, you come up with very similar patterns that are already there since decades. And of course, some of these patterns have been infused by misinformation. So there again, I'm relating it to information entropy. There are specific patterns which some stakeholders are using to collude facts with fiction, as we know, a very well-known technique in counterintelligence. And it's also in this field that we apply these patterns, or we apply these techniques better to make sure that we come up with some hard facts about psi phenomena. But also there, it's very tricky because everybody is talking about UAP and misinformation relating the former UFOs. But there is also a lot of mystery around psi phenomenon and the national security state. Scientists like Jacobo Greenberg that suddenly vanish, and a decade later we get like declassified papers about mind-to-mind communication. So there is a lot there too. There is a lot to investigate there too, and we're very happy to work with volunteers and with other specialists, people that have good access to those libraries to OCR them, to transform them into the right informational vector databases that then can be used to come up with claim-based knowledge graphs where we can attribute trustworthiness factors to claims.
Thank you for your answer, Jonathan. That's actually really interesting. So we have another question up from Sarah. Reflecting on AI, is there testimony from individuals that has not been discussed enough in your opinion, Jonathan, or isn't just being acknowledged quite enough in today's conversation regarding UFOs and the phenomenon that stick out from AI?
Well, it's a good question because we have, of course, the human mind and the current mindset of humanity, the zeitgeist, let's say. And the zeitgeist has certain glasses and priorities to look at facts. And it is interesting to understand that AI engines do not necessarily have those same paradigm glasses as we all have today. So there is indeed a lot of information which is under-illuminated and which is pretty interesting, which come up. But there we also have like a very big problem that suppose we find like 10,000 very interesting facts. How do we present with Sol this to the community? We could easily generate with AI 10,000 papers about all these topics, but it's also the attention span of the community, the attention span of people new to the topic, and how to configure information in order for them to digest it better. And their AI can also help. Imagine in Europe, you have a lot of people that are slightly getting interested in the topic, and it's really very different to how to approach them and to explain him the thorny issues and the complexities than somebody in the US who has like another mindset. And in all these cases, AI becomes more and more relevant, especially these open source large language models like we've seen with DeepSeek R1. And they also come vehicles of truth-telling. We all know that DeepSeek, if you ask it's about facts in Chinese history, it will be suddenly erased and people are laughing and commenting about it on Twitter. But people do not realize that we in the West, and I'm joining Europe here with United States, also have our paradigms, and some of them are maybe misinformation that we all believe in. So what we see with this clash, the geopolitical clash between the nation states and AI, also becomes relevant to the UAP topic at some instance, because these reasoning engines, if you give them the right prompt, they will at some point be able to go to, for instance, some document leaks and say like, look, this and this, it's a font that didn't exist in the 60s, so this is certainly misinformation. And other things that we humans have no attention for because we simply have our paradigm of today.
Thank you, Jonathan. Absolutely. It's so interesting. And, the topic is a lot vaster than just, limited to some technical issue. So thank you for highlighting also the philosophical and social and economical implications. The next question is actually a very interesting one. So Matt Hüttner is asking, where and how are you sourcing the data you input to the AI models, social media, military, or something else? Go ahead.
A very, very good question. And some aspect that I highlighted during my talk is also information data points are also often data points that we do not expect. So for instance, if there is a statement by Susan Gough of the DOD, or a question from whoever, even Stephen Greenstreet or something, and she doesn't answer for 6 or 7 days, that's also a data point. So it's not only presidential libraries, university libraries like the MIT archives and others that are important to us. It's also the lack of information or some kind of strange response to something which is not consistent with earlier statements. And therefore it's so, and I repeat this topic of the knowledge graph, it's so important that we map this into a very stable scheme of entities and relationships, because then also these inconsistencies, they just pop out and they're easily derived with these powerful reasoning engines, and you could do it in that way. So the most important archives are the newspaper archives. And a friend of mine, Richard Geldreich, is very well fond of these archives, because whatever happens to a whistleblower, there is always a footprint in time and space around when that certain whistleblower or alleged witness. I used the example of June Crane, who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And if we could just reconstruct her whole life and relate it to her storytelling and to the people that were there interviewing her, we can just, like a normal investigator just going through the files of a murder case, just come up with trustworthiness degrees. And apart from newspapers, we have the National Archives, we have literature that is of course normal literature, like Jacques Vallée's book and that kind of things, and they all have certain value in time and space, but our paradigm, our priority is to go back in time and analyze where the rampant misinformation was really, like, how could I say, increased significantly. And a friend of mine, Jacques Vallée, of course, was there in the beginning, in the Parisian Institute, looking at the first satellites, and already there confronted with inconsistencies, like a superior that said to him, like, look, just ditch those records. But it's afterwards that it all started to become much more complicated. Some of you have seen the documentary Mirage Man with Richard Doty, and of course, we all know that something was off there, but how much off and with what combination of truth and fiction is still a mystery until we unleash these wonderful tools to start building a backbone of an activity log of 7 decades of confusing information. And of course, the social media aspect of it is very, very interesting, because we all know that when something happens, like the New Jersey drone wave, that suddenly there are a bunch of new X accounts that are created a couple of months before, that all have each other as follower and followee. And you know, and Elon Musk also talked about it, how they use AI to find clusters of disinformation. It's exactly what we try to do as well. We try to pinpoint what memes are being posted there to confuse the community, to generate conflict in the community. And that is not directly related to the UAP phenomenon itself in terms of data of objects, but it's related to the firewall and the architecture of the firewall that some stakeholders managed to sustain for several decades.
Fantastic. That's so interesting. I fear we only have time for one more question. So let's see, here we have a question by Keegan Kuntz, and he wants to know, how close is AI to being able to accurately determine the credibility of a given UAP event or story, a testimony, and what would you measure that accuracy against to test the progress of that AI?
Really good question. And of course, I'm a Belgian, so the Belgian UFO wave was quite clean in its setup. The government was cooperative, the press was cooperative in the sense that they openly reported about it, and there were just like thousands of testimonials, big books. I think it was 800 pages thick, the book of Sobebs, where all these incidents are described in extremely great detail. And it must be said, the description of the triangle with the 3 lights, the behavior when it's tilting and flying off with high speed, together with the testimonial of the pilots that saw it on the radar, the 2 F-16 pilots in 1989 October. Yeah, I mean, you don't even need AI to really understand that something is going on there. But at this moment in time, 2025, we have a very big disadvantage. Everything is digital, and it's very efficient to email each other and to have video calls and conferences like this. But it's much more easy to generate and diffuse misinformation nowadays than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, because there was not such thing as an internet that everybody was using. So the thing is, today it's much more difficult with AI to state trustworthiness, because many people think that AI is something static and that there will be a company or an engine or a product that will be able to spot deepfakes. But nobody understands that that very product will generate the data set for the next deepfake product to really circumvent that very product. So we're living in a hall of mirrors in a time where it's really tricky to distinguish fact from fiction. But of course, the tools are also becoming much more sophisticated. But this imbalance is there. The tools that we have now, if we just restrict the data to the 50s, it's a more ideal situation, let's say, because in the 50s, they would never expect that there would be something as AI from the future that would just investigate and find those misinformation snippets in a much more easy way than people would have done it manually in the 50s themselves. Okay, is that
well, we were doing
enough?
that manually in the 90s, even when we were doing field investigations of close encounter witnesses and abductees. So you have to use psychological techniques to read the person's vocal and body language, and do background investigation and to corroborating who they are, how they behave, and whatnot. So it's a whole picture of every witness that you have to do. You just don't take their story at face value. Actually, you do, but you've got to corroborate them for, to eliminate hoaxing or lying or fabricating. They might have a psychological problem that leads them to fabricate false stories.
Yeah. If I have to conclude there with some facts, I mean, we have a very unstable AI field where hallucination is still an absolute problem. And at the other hand, we have a UAP community / a lot of dispersed data where hallucinations because of misinformation and other bad stakeholders is also a big problem. So we live in extremely interesting times. And at some point, some field will accelerate and become a solution. And hopefully that's what we will see in the next 18 months, an acceleration of data release, declassification in conjunction with ever more powerful reasoning engines to go through these data troves. And I'm really looking forward to the JFK files and to unleash our AI engine to some of these new details.
Jonathan and Eric, thank you very, very much. Now, our audience, please stay with us. We're not at all done here, but I want to thank both of you, especially Jonathan, for your statement that we are in a hall of mirrors right now, where it's very difficult to distinguish between fact and fiction. And Eric's, because of AI technology and general misinformation due to the media environment we're in. And Eric, thank you as well for adding that comment, which is very apropos here, that with any UAP data, there is a dimension of understanding human witnesses, which requires a different kind of vetting. I say that because I want our audience to understand that we really face a double problem right now. We have an old problem, which is about a lot of misinformation that comes from witnesses and even researchers that one has to wade through and really attempt to find the ground truth in if one wants to understand what's going on with UAP and alleged NHI. And now we have the additional problem that comes from AI and different kinds of media as well. And what we do at Sol is we're really attempting to have a data-driven, research-driven, evidence-based approach to this without flinching in front of the weirdest and the strangest things that we know to be facts about UAP, but often just strain our scientific and intellectual paradigms, if not go beyond them. So anyway, thank you very much to both of you for sharing that level of insight with us. And thank you, Mara, for putting forward so many great questions to Jonathan. And Mara, I want to turn it over to you now because I think you want to say a few words about what Soul will be doing in the next months related to AI.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. And a heartfelt thank you to all of you for your thoughtful engagement today. I was really happy to see a lot of familiar names in the chat and some new, more unfamiliar names to me, but all great interactions, and your questions were so insightful. I even saw some were directed my way. Thank you for that. But today we are putting our symposium speakers, the highlight is on them. So yeah, I think conversations like these matter, and they push the boundaries of what we know. They open doors to new possibilities. And that's why we'll be hosting more of these events, giving you the chance to interact with more of our symposium speakers and to dive deeper into the Soul Foundation's projects. So I even saw some people were worried that no questions were directed to me. Again, I'll be very happy to connect with you on LinkedIn or via email. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them as well. But if you believe in our mission and the work we're doing, whether it's advancing AI for UAP analysis, by developing our backend right now, and covering the costs that go with that, or shaping policy, investigating experiencer phenomena, studying anomalous materials, or exploring the frontiers of consciousness itself, we invite you to participate and to support us. So you can do that in several ways. If you want to donate, you can PayPal or a QR code, which I will share shortly with you in the chat. And for larger contributions, feel free to reach out to me directly via email or LinkedIn. I will also share those in the chat right after this little announcement. And if you are interested in volunteering, I will also share a special link for that so we can set up a collaboration. On my side, I just want to thank you again for being such an active and growing community, for being part of this conversation. Your support, whether it's through participation, funding, or simply, by spreading the word, helps us continue. Thank you again. Peter, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mara. And to amplify what Mara is saying in a very simple way, we are looking for collaborators right now of every kind. And so, please contact Mara through LinkedIn or write in through the website. You can contact me directly if you want to. We're really looking for people who believe in what we're doing, who can be partners in our work. I want to say thank you to Mara for the fantastic contribution today that she made. And I really want to thank again Jonathan and Eric. Jonathan has been a partner in our work for me for the last few years. And I've been waiting for him to really debut more on stage and reveal a lot of the work he's been doing quietly. And we really should thank Eric too, who has more than people know, taken a lot of risk in the last years to inform the Senate and Congress more broadly of what he knows, both as a private individual and a government contractor, about things that Congress, the U.S. Congress should know, and thus the rest of the world about UAP and NHI. So, if we were in a physical venue right now, I would lead applause and initiate that to the two of you. Thank you very, very much. And the Soul Foundation thanks you. We are, as a last word, I'll say we're going forward with a lot of our projects now, and it's going to be a big year for our work. So please stay focused and tuned in to stuff we're doing, and expect more of these events. We're going to make an announcement soon about a more regular kind of event that we're going to be doing that we hope you'll be present at, and you can expect to get on a frequent basis a place you can get reliable information, vetted information, insightful speakers, leading figures and voices in the conversation, and most importantly, a sober and grounded approach, even as we exercise all the imagination that we can to understand, the complexity of the UAP phenomena. So thank you for being here, and thank you to our speakers.
Oh, thank you for the invitation, and I was very happy to be here. And I thought the questions were great questions.
Absolutely. Fantastic audience, and happy to go in more detail in the next session. Of course, for us, it was the first time, a little bit looking how to manage and how to behave in such a potentially complicated discussion. And thank you, all of you, and see you at the next event.
And thank you to our producer, Ross Howard, and to Sam Gerber as well, who's assisting in that. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.